Good afternoon, all. CamelbackTrading.org coming to you this Tuesday afternoon, October 6th. We are looking at the last 2 days of the SPY ETF's market profile here on Window Trader. And on a day when the bulls were trying to establish themselves again by taking out yesterday's high and even attempting to have a trend day up, we had singles in J, looked like we'd have singles in K, only to have a tweet absolutely wipe out the entire day. And with a trend day down, double distribution day, and an outside day down. First and foremost, we are absolutely in tweet and headline territory. This is what we saw during the trade deal with China. That was off the table for a long time. Well, it started last week, and it's certainly continuing this week. We saw it again in F yesterday, and now we see. On Friday. We saw it yesterday in J. We're seeing it again, big time today. We had a $6 range, so it's going to be very, very important to be on your toes at all times and have stops in. I had a very poor day today. Had nothing to do with this flush out. Actually, it almost would have bailed me out. I took a very poor trade that I'll go over. Starting in G, I held it for about 2.5 hours and 11 minutes after I took it off the table. It went from a 5-figure loss, would have been to a double a 5-figure gain. Because in 8 minutes, we went from here to here in 8 minutes. So I wouldn't have even been able to get out of it the way I usually do too early. And I would have been paid 3 times the amount I lost. So again, that was wishing and hoping. And it was a poor trade. But it's just quite disturbing overall. We end with an outside day down, which is bearish. Volume, last 3 time frames very heavy, which put us above the average for the day. We opened in balance, above value. We had higher value to start the day. Then we were overlapping to higher most of the day until KLM made it unchanged on the day where we took out. We were overlapping both the high and the day's low. Started the day on a good note. We traded down to D. I said D is very, very important. That's where change took place yesterday. That kept us above the weekly high and the 5-day balance high. Well, it dipped its toe in A. I took a long. All it did was stay there for a moment, went back to around the opening, and had a nice trade in A period for to start the day, 338 calls. Then in B period, I took a real quick long, just basically go over it. I wanted to take it above A, right above A, to see what we got. I didn't. I actually took it closer to B's high, which turned out to be not a proper trade. Got out of it for scratch, so that was decent. Actually, before I even took that trade, I took a short in B period. 342 puts below the opening when we got below it, which worked out. And then I took that long later in B period when we went back up. C period. Once I got out of that long, it didn't look like the singles would hold, So I got out of the long for scratch and immediately bought 40 puts of the 342 puts to see the single prints filled. Did that and took off the rest down at the opening and below. Now, E period. So we one time framed up in B. C stopped it. D started one time framing down. E was continuing it. However, the indices were basically up or unchanged. We had overlap and a higher value, and I didn't think the tempo was in any good. I said, obviously, if we have single prints, I do not want to be long. But it didn't look like we would in E period. Got long the 338 calls, because I said at that time, I'm looking to fade a new high, a new low, the way we were. Because we got pretty rotational, even though it was one time framing down. Well, that trade turned out to be very nice. Bought the 338 calls, rode them up, held some even to get to POC, and that was another trade that I banked. So it was a decent morning to start. This is where, and this is the last trade of the day I took, and which absolutely destroyed me. I knew, and more importantly than the trade itself, was holding it, the trade location, everything. So let's go over what I did. So G started, and I said, I might look for an afternoon rally high. We were one time framing down. Value now is overlapping to higher, but And right off the bat, I knew it wasn't great trade location. I said, if we take out F's high, we stop the one-time framing down, you're going to probably get shorts to cover. But the problem was we're not that far from the opening. And actually, we weren't even that far from the day's high, which was a poor high. So right off the bat, I should have realized that trade was not the proper trade to take. And the fact that I was telling the room that all this was weak longs getting out and then shorts tried to push. Again, D's high was critical to me. And what did we do? Again, I took a long down here. So shorts were trying but couldn't get much out of it. They couldn't get much out of it. We got above D's high. We never even saw E's low and F. So once we had the inside bar, and the more I look at this, and the more I'm talking about it, because just like I'm talking to you and explaining, I'm basically talking to myself how poor that trade was. G took out F's high, and I didn't short it immediately. And again, we're in 10-tick increments, so it doesn't look like it. But we kind of hung out here for a little while. And then right around the opening, I took the short thinking, well, maybe we'll just get above the opening, we'll hold D's high and come back in. Wrong. What compounded it is, I added to it in H. As soon as we took out the days, B and C's high, I added good size. I was now short just under 100 puts. Now, I had the 342s. So I was in the money still. I was in the money the whole trade. So now the wishing and hoping started. I'm like, I don't need much out of this. I started around just above the opening or around the opening. I added right around here. I don't need a lot. I knew the trade location was poor. What I was hoping for, and again, there's no hoping and wishing, was for either I or J to take out one of the time frames, previous lows, stop the one-time framing up, and now get back to pot. Because again, we were 7 for 7 wide at the time. So I did think there was still decent odds to at least test the opening and yesterday's high, if not the point of control. And that's all I would have needed. At the time, if I took out H's low or J took out I's low, I would have been in the money in that trade. Now, it's still wishing and hoping because we were one time framing up. Never happened, obviously. We had single prints. When J ended, we had singles. K open. Now I'm in the hole even more. I'm not adding on. Couldn't add on. It was my trading account, which I was maxed out on. I got below the threshold, too, of the 20 of the money I keep in there. And I do that for a reason, so I don't add on and take tremendously bad trades. And then when K started running, after almost 2.5 hours, started it pretty, in G here, K was well into it. So it was probably a full 2.5 hours. I'm like, we have singles in J. It looks like we're going to have singles in K. I put it to bed for a big loss. And 11 minutes later, this happened. Now again, if this had happened 12 minutes earlier when I was still short, you talk about wishing and hoping. And wishing and hoping, that's exactly what I would have gotten. But I'll tell you what, I would have taken it. And I'm telling you this for a reason. I should have been out of this trade a lot earlier. Should have been out of this trade above B and C's high instead of adding. And then I certainly should have been out of this trade when I didn't take out H is low, J didn't take out I's high, and J went back and took out H's I's high. Yes, it still would have been a pretty decent loss, but not as big as it was because I took it out almost at the top, if not the top. This is innovator trade. This is like if you take an innovator trade, we're one time framing up, well, I think we're going to take out H's low. I think we're going to take out J's low. Bullshit. That's an innovator trade. It's the worst, it's the best of the risk rewards. It's the greatest reward because if it does take it out and flush, you got in early. But if it doesn't, you're going back to the highs, and that's exactly what it did. So it was a poor trade. And if I had gone from a $10,000 loss to a $30,000 gain, it would have been nothing but luck. I would have taken it. Believe me, I would have taken it. It actually makes the loss that much more painful to see this. I almost wish after I got out of the trade, we would have gone and tested the weekly high up at 340, 306 and had a trend day up that held. This is even more of a punch in the gut. But that's life. And that's what I'm teaching my room. Believe me, Nobody in the room was going along for the ride with me because I told them that trade was wrong. I told them. I said I wasn't thrilled about the initial location I took. I was actually more comfortable taking the add-on initially because we did come in I and J. It's like, well, maybe we do take it, come back. Didn't happen. So it's a great lesson for the room. It's a great lesson for you guys and gals. I don't shy away from it. I'm not going to lie and say I didn't lose. I'm not going to lie and say it was a good trade. I'd be a fool to say to you or anybody in my room, hey, this was a good trade I took. It just, I knew this was going to happen. A lot of people will do that. You're not going to get that from me. You're going to get honesty. You're going to get basically what I see what the market's doing. And the market was doing what I didn't want it to do. So I told the room, at this point, you should either be on the sidelines or long. Plain and simple. Anybody who shorted K's high and reaped the benefits of this was lucky. Plain and simple, lucky. And I'm sure there's people out there saying, well, I knew this was going to go, we're going to stall up here. Bullshit. You're lucky. We were one time framing up with a trend day up with value that was overlapping to high that probably would have been pulled higher at some point if that tweet didn't come out. Sorry I'm going on about it, but it's important for you that you obviously watch this video to learn, so it's important for you to learn. It's important for my room, and it's certainly important for me. And then once this happened, I didn't do anything. I just watched. Any push up was obviously a good opportunity to short if you wanted to. I did think once we took out L's high, we might possibly get more out of it, but they put that to rest pretty quickly. We only took out L's high by 10 cents and then came down $3 again and finished with an outside day down. So, destinations for the upside. We have the price probe, L's low, 334.54, even though we closed above it. We don't know if it's accepted or rejected until tomorrow morning. Then we have the single prints, M's high to E's low. They start at 337.13. They get filled at 338.66, so 153 ticks worth of single prints. It's fairly large. We're going to treat tomorrow as two separate days, KL and M, and treat this as a separate day. And then above that, we don't have anything to the day's high, folks. 342.17. We ended 8Y. So if by some chance they do go back to the table, by some chance they do reach an agreement on stimulus, well, there's not much up here if you were to fill these single prints. For the downside, we have today's low of 334.38, and then this gets dicey. We don't have anything until the afternoon pullback low, which I use from the second of 331.95, and then the bottom of the 5-day balance, 331.19, and filling the gap at 329.58, 161-point gap here. Now, if they do get frisky and do that, well, then not only are you now below this 5-day or 7-day balance, you'd be back inside this 5-day balance. So that's how they're going to operate these algos, right? And below that, I'll give you one. Well, I'm not going to give you any more right now. We'll stop at that 329.58. We had the trend day from the 25th. We have all the single prints. We had 1, 2, 3. We had 5 sets of single prints from that day. This is where change took place. Right? We had the single prints. We gapped higher. They tried to get into it the following day. They tried to get into it again on the 2nd, but they held it each and every time. We battled in a 5-day balance. Finally got above it yesterday and today, only to do this in the late afternoon. And then chart-wise, so nothing's changed in the monthly. We're in balance. Nothing's changed. Weekly, yes, we're one-time framing up 2 weeks, but it is balanced for me. Right? The next goal was the 340-306 level. Looked like we would have had a chance to get it, not today, but possibly sometime this week. A lot of damage has been done now, so unless they take back the lower distribution and get back inside of today's upper end, then we won't have a chance to get to that 340-306 level. And then the daily, we fought the 50-day moving average. We closed above it yesterday. We were well above it today, only to come back and cascade down and close below it. What do you want to call this? Again, it's a trading is an art. It's visual. Everybody's balance is different. You can use this as a 2-day balance. You could use it as a 7-day balance. Regardless, we're in balance, with today's high being the top end, and if you're using the 7-day balance, 331.19 being the lower end. The bottom line is, if we take out today's low, you get much better odds of getting to the bottom of this 7-day balance. If we get back above the 50 and get back into the upper distribution from today, well, then maybe we go to the top end of it. I guess it's going to depend if we get more tweets and headlines. Those are going to be very important going forward. So keep that in mind. I hope you had a much better day than I did. That's another great advantage of being in my trading room. Because even when I'm in a trade that's wrong, I'm keeping you out of it and telling you why and walking you through the whole trade. So webinars, seminars, you can ask for whatever you want. You get an education on a daily basis of what I'm looking at in this market and why I think it's doing what it's doing. And I think that's pretty priceless, let alone for $20 a month. Have a great night, and we'll speak prior to the opening tomorrow.